welcome to TAC Talk, the official podcast of Tucson Asphalt, where we break down the blacktop and spotlight the people who power the pavement. Join your host, Alex Dietz, Noah Dayton, and Jennifer Niles, as we dive into the stories, strategies, and leadership shaping the asphalt and construction world in Southern Arizona and beyond. From job site wisdom to industry trends, company culture to big picture thinking. If it's paving the future, we're talking about it here on TAC Talk.
Today, I'm excited. We're going to jump into the world of project management and some career development. We have Stanton Duke with us here from Dozer CPM. He's founder of Dozer CPM, and they're a company that's transforming the way that we approach project management, bringing clarity, structure, and simplicity to the chaos of complex projects. Stanton, welcome to the show, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited to have you here. So, where we want to start, obviously, we want to get into the Dozer CPM stuff and dive deep into what you guys are doing over there. But why don't you take us back to the beginning? Give us a little bit about your background, what brought you into construction industry, and then what led you to ultimately start in Dozer.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here. So I went to school here in Tucson, went to the University of Arizona.
Awesome.
I got my degree in civil engineering. So I think initially that was kind of more of going to be my focus. But between my sophomore and junior year of college, there's a company that was building a big streetcar here in town right through campus. And so I would walk outside, see it every day, and I'm like, well, that looks cool. You know, you see a bunch of big yellow iron out there. And, you kid like that, you're not quite sure what you want to do with your career. So ended up getting an internship with them in school. I guess did well enough they didn't kick me out. So ended up having a job with them my last couple years of school there.
Oh, cool.
And then once I graduated, stayed with that company another 4 to 5 years, where worked my way up from project engineer, project manager, estimator. Got to see a lot of sides of that business here. Got to travel the U.S. here a little bit, which was exciting. Got to see some cool places. Then after that, I got my PE stamp, so decided to go try my hand in some engineering design and like construction management consulting. Yeah. So I did that for about 2 to 3 years, and relatively successful. Enjoyed that period, but wanted to get back a little bit more into the big construction. So after that, joined a company here in town as a project manager for a little bit. And then had actually an itch to start my own construction company. Yeah. So always had kind of wanted to do that. The industry was booming at the time and thought I'd give it a try. Ultimately wasn't overly successful in getting that one off the ground. But tremendous amount of experience that I learned from that, running a business and starting a business from that aspect of it. Yeah. And then actually rejoined that same company as part of their leadership, was a vice president of operations there, the COO briefly before starting Dozer CPM. So that's our current project, and really excited about it.
Awesome. So what, I guess, why don't you tell us a little bit about, high level, what is Dozer CPM? What are you guys doing? Clearly, are there specific pain points within the industry that you guys are really trying to solve? And then tell us about the name Dozer CPM. Yeah. Give us some insight behind that.
I'll dive into both of them. As far as, what inspired us to start this course and start this company, there was within a short time frame, I had about 4 or 5 project managers, project engineers come to me, and all wanting continuous education, some level of a course or something that they could go take, right? And I feel like that's, pretty common, people wanting to do that, right? They want to grow in their careers. They want that training maybe outside of just the day-to-day mentoring kind of stuff. Yeah. So we ended up sitting down. We were looking for a course that they could take and, supplement with, the day-to-day job. It's pretty busy. And could not find something that was specific to the civil industry, and couldn't find something that actually gave procedural knowledge. Right. So I feel like a lot of training that we came across was either general high level PM, which anyone which is great. It's just different. Like a construction PM is just a different skill set and a different lesson.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff out there. I know I've looked into, obviously through my career, cause I don't come from traditional, background education wise, right? More kind of started from the field and just I don't know, somehow found myself here, right? I think like AGC has one that they do through San Diego State University. There's like a couple of these little like things out there, right? But they are a lot more like high level, bigger picture type stuff. They don't really get down into the nitty gritty. And like I think you guys have developed a bunch of like the spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff that you don't get from those kind of big, higher level, just project management courses.
And
right?
they definitely have their place. And I'm not trying to knock on them, but it's just a different when you try to get into some more of the specifics. And so couldn't quite find that, and just kind of gave me the inspiration to potentially go ahead and create it. And to be able to give that. And so you alluded to it. So not only, our course has a bunch of different lessons on, daily, weekly, monthly tasks and general project management, but each one has a standard operating procedure associated with it. So it's very specific to the extent of, hey, not only you give the lessons on, time cards, right? Why we do them, what needs to be on them, but a particular process that you can follow. The foreman submits it by the end of shift. Superintendent reviews it by 9 a.m. the next morning. Project manager, project engineer approves it by 10 a.m.
Right.
It's very specific and there for a reason, because I've always liked myself when I'm reading or learning, I always wanted to hear how someone else did it. Right. I would rather have someone build out a picture, because even if there is an aspect of it that maybe a company or you guys do differently, and you don't have to apply everything, I'd rather know the specifics of how someone did it, iterate, implement, that into it.
Yeah.
And so that was long answer. That's kind of was the inspiration for this, is we felt like there maybe wasn't this type of product that was very specific to our industry that both individuals could use to improve their careers, but also companies could use to train their teams, relative to some very detailed, specific ways of running construction projects.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because as you were talking through that, one of the big things that came into my head was, obviously you and I know there's a lot of guys in the industry that we've come up with that then go out and start their own companies, right?
For sure.
I mean, we know a lot of them. And this is something almost that, as I'm thinking through it, is like an awesome platform for somebody that's getting ready to start growing and scaling a business, right? They can access your library and be able to plug and play their systems, rather than having to go back and start from zero and, oh shoot, how did I do this at company X or Y? And, trying to rebuild that wheel.
Exactly. Yeah. The challenge with that too, is that, a lot of times the beginning of companies, when you're starting, like you said, you're kind of trying to just survive a little bit. Right. And
100%.
Whoever started, the owner, they're out, the guy, running the piece of equipment and everything. And they're more focused on getting the clients in, and it usually grows, which is exciting. And with that growth, there comes a certain point where you want your projects operating in a standard manner, right?
For sure.
And it's not to limit people's creativity or anything, but this is a business, right? And in order to be profitable, you need to provide the most value to your owners, but you got to be hitting your schedules, making money on your job. And so by the time the company gets to that size, it's really challenging to then go back and try to internally change all those processes, right? Because duct tape's holding up there, and scotch tape's holding up that, and it works. But if you want to get past a certain point, it really helps having your whole team on the same page. And so that's what we're trying to do, is be that training mechanism. And like I said, a company's not going to come in and try to take every piece, but what works for them, and have it built out, ready to go, where they can just implement these standard operating procedures and hopefully be in a better place than they were. Yeah,
that's awesome. Because I think the misconception, I mean, what we do isn't magic, right? And really, you make your way around to different companies, and one way or another, everybody's kind of doing everything the same way. They kind of have their own expectations or whatever they want to put on things. But even then, like you or I, we leave a company, we go somewhere else. We don't necessarily have all that to take with us. And then you try to start your own or go somewhere else, and you're like, wow, just trying to remember how to, put everything together, build the formulas in the Excel files, and what did I use for this, and how did I track that? And, to have a place, that somebody's really taken all that and put it together. And then talk to us about it's not just come by my spreadsheets, right? So talk to us a little bit about what the process of Dozer is from not only from a company. So like if someone like Tucson Asphalt wanted to come to you guys and be like, hey, we really need to implement some monthly projection process, right? What do you have for us there? But then also if somebody, we've got a new project engineer that, maybe I don't have the time to really give into them every day and get into some of that stuff. I can say, hey, I want to sign you up for Dozer.
Yep.
Plug into that and start checking out that curriculum and see what they have. What is those kind of two different paths look like?
Yeah. So our main product right now is our course. So it's a Dozer CPM called our Heavy Civil Construction Project Management course.
Gotcha.
So from a company side, they'll get a number of licenses and then assign that to the individuals in their course. So that has the course itself, which is 8 different modules. Again, that goes from some general project management, some heavy civil foundational skills to exactly what someone needs to do on a project, daily, weekly, monthly, in order to run that. But included in that for the company is, I think right now is about 35 spreadsheets and resources that, we built out from scratch that are ready to go. We unlock them for the company too. So if you want to do it, you can use them across your entire company.
Oh, okay.
The standard operating procedures, there's about 50 of those. And the same thing is we give them to you in Word form so you can edit them, make them your own.
Oh, that's cool.
And so you're not only training your team right through the course, but that company also has that aspect of these resources and the standard operating procedures ready to go. So as being able to have both, right, as far as that goes. From an individual standpoint, because we also want individuals to take this and be a part of it, across the industry. Very similar. Maybe not, they're not so focused on the company aspect of the SOPs, though it's probably still a pretty good idea that they can then implement them on their projects individually. But there our big focus is how do we make the life a little bit easier for a project engineer and project manager? Right. I think it's such a great industry to be in, and it's a good, career to have. But it can be kind of stressful, right? And projects can be somewhat chaotic, being honest, especially if you don't know really what you're doing or looking out to it. So it's trying to help those individuals who maybe are feeling a little bit overwhelmed with their projects, implement solid operational rhythm and really get into here's all the things that need to happen, when they need to happen, and just alleviates, some of that stress. And so that's what I would say are kind of two main focuses are the companies really training their teams and building out their standard operating procedures relative to that. And then also individuals, taking it to improve their career. And ideally, we'd love to have this maybe even be a pathway into the industry. So you and I have talked about that a little bit, right? And the idea is a degree the only way to get in. Right. And I think we'll get into that. Both of us, don't think that's the case, and definitely viable, but maybe not the only one. And having this be almost like a trade school for project engineers, right? Coming into it. Nothing beats field experience. Nothing beats just being in the seat, but you're talking about trying to get in and have someone give you a chance. Well, here's at least a really solid education and something that they have access to for, up to 6 months or a good amount of time that then they can use in their career to start. So that's our intent, kind of what we're trying to do, and the people we're trying to help serve here in our industry.
Sounds like excuse me, I got it. It sounds like an awesome resource. I look back on my career, and I kind of been a lot of different places. I've been pretty fortunate to be able to work at a lot of different places and gain a lot of different experience. But I've also, one thing I recognize too in my career is I've been very, very, very fortunate to have had a lot of really good mentors and leadership over my career, and people that have really taken me in and exposed me to a lot of things that, I've found myself I've been in the industry about 20 years. I've found myself in more rooms that I had no business being in by accident, right? And really just by having good mentors, good leaders, people that really wanted to help, expose me to the bigger pieces of the industry, right? But not everybody has that. That's, while I think we're doing better as an industry to try to encourage mentorship and training and that kind of stuff, We're still not great at it.
Yeah.
And I think this is definitely something that can really help kind of bridge that gap for those folks that, like you mentioned, that either, young kids graduate in high school that want to go work for a construction company in the field, but also, want to see that pathway. What else can I do rather than just run equipment? But also those, I'm a big proponent of bringing field guys in from the field.
Absolutely.
Right? Those guys that show the mental aptitude to not only be able to run equipment and build work, but also be able to come in and understand cost projecting and job costs and that kind of stuff.
Already have this tremendous skill set from how to build a job,
exactly.
right? Which is really hard to teach.
Yep. But then for them to have those resources to tap into on their own to kind of build that foundation that maybe they haven't had a chance, formally to be able to do. To me, that's something that I'm super passionate about.
Yeah.
I've been involved with an organization, you see it on the wall over there, Southern Arizona Construction Career Days, for about 10 years. And that's, that thing was started to help not only expose the younger generation to the construction industry, because there's so much, I grew up, again, both my parents are retired educators. So I grew up in the, you don't want to be a ditch digger for your whole life, right? Like, do well in school. You don't want to dig ditches. And it's like, I don't know, I do pretty well digging ditches,
It's great career to have.
But I also recognize that not everybody is fortunate enough to be able to have, again, the doors open the way they have for me, right? And the resources out there. I know as I was kind of building my career, I was hungry looking for these things. And I think this is definitely something that solves that problem that people can tap into. But from a project management standpoint, so something I want to get your insight is more towards leadership, right? So in your mind, what's the difference between project management and project leadership?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was actually thinking about that one. I listen to a lot of Alex Hormozi podcasts.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Hormozi, right?
Yep.
It just kind of fits with the business that we're running and those kind of things. And so if I quote something, there's just a real good chance that that's kind of where it came from.
Sure.
But, he talks about one thing that I really like is describing things by what they do, right?
Yeah.
So instead of like defining those terms, it's like, what are the actions of someone who's, project manager as a title is a solid title, but the question is relative to just the word of someone who's like leaning on only their title, right? Just management versus who actually leads the team.
Well, because there's a lot of really good project managers out there. A lot of guys on paper that can manage the spreadsheets and the finances of a project, right?
Yep.
But a lot of times those guys struggle with leading projects, right? And when it comes down to, I don't know if I've ever built one job that's been perfect all the way through. You're always going to run into some sort of problem, right? Whether it's weather or people or site conditions. It's those guys that can not only manage the project, but how do they lead their teams through those struggles?
So one of the biggest that I was thinking about is in my mind, what does a leader do versus maybe just a manager do, right? What are those actions that maybe someone can look at? Okay, if I want to be more of a leader, what can I do?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that as I've seen in my career and experienced is the people that truly lead teams and inspire teams, and people look back and say, I want to work with that person. I want to work for that person. Do a few things. And one is they genuinely care about the individual's well-being.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes gets underplayed with maybe someone who's just a manager is just focused on the profits, is just focused on the schedule, is just focused on the job performing, which, don't get me wrong, matters, right, to some extent. But you can't lose sight of the fact that you have people working for you who have lives, who have wives, husbands, children's lives outside of this, things going on. And so do you have the ability to empathize and genuinely care about their well-being and support people's growth?
For sure.
I think that's definitely a big part. And the other one that I have found is the way you manage your ego. is a big part of it. And I think sometimes you get people who get promoted to positions, and now they feel like, oh, I'm in this position, I have to make a call,
right,
or I have to
right.
be the one who knows the answer to this. And the interesting thing you find is when you become a project manager, or let's say a construction manager, you're usually there because you know how to solve problems, but the problems that come to your desk are going to be ones you've probably never seen before, right? So if you're a new project manager, a project engineer comes to you with a question, well, they're coming to you with that question because they don't know how to solve it, right? And anything that they know how to solve, they would just do, right? So you're getting those questions. And as a project manager, you maybe have never faced that before, right? You've run four or five jobs as a project engineer, whatever the thing is, but you've never had a subcontractor default or have some issue, right? And so how do you handle that moment, right? How do you handle when that project engineer comes to you? And too many times that I think just the individual who maybe is a little bit too hung up in that position and just, leans on their title. The response I've seen is, I don't know, you just got to go figure that out, right? That's your job. I don't have time for this. Or the flip side of it is they just make something up, right? They're like, well, I should know this. I don't. So we're just going to wing it. We're going to pick something. And honestly, people see through that. Even, all the time, right? And so even if you're a young engineer or someone early on in the industry, you know when someone's just making something up.
For sure.
And you'll be able to walk away and be like, well, it's their call to make, so I respect that, but that's not really the answer. So what I have found, I think, in my opinion, what really good leaders do is when they're faced with those things in their teams bring them those things, they don't dismiss it. And even if they don't know, they're willing to say, you know what? I've never faced that either, 100%. But let's go sit down together and let's go figure this out. Now, one of our mottos is pull up a chair on our company. It's like, that's cool. A good leader, are you willing to then go sit next to that project engineer and say, I'm going to pull up a chair next to you. Let's go figure this out. Because ideally, if you're in that position, you're at least really good at solving problems. For sure. Right? Maybe you don't know the answer. Critical thinking skills and asking questions, getting that information. And then what you're able to do in that leadership role is you've coached that individual through it. You've learned it. You haven't had your ego flare up that you had to have the answer. You guys came to the answer together. And then you take that information, you disseminate it to your team, right? You've learned it. Now, not just that one engineer knows it. Now all engineers do it. And then you're able to, as you take a project manager, for example, you're able to kind of go back up to the level, so to speak, of running the overall job. And now that project engineer they feel supported. They feel heard. They feel valued, all of those things. And so you do that time and time again, that team's going to go to bat for you. Oh, for sure. Right. And I think a lot of times people, when they get into those positions, rely, hey, I'm in that position. I have this title. I have to have the answer. And if I don't, there's almost a negative reaction to it of like, either get away from me or
it's your fault that I don't know this answer.
That I don't know this answer. And honestly, just admitting, be like, okay, you're going to be faced with, and I've learned some of this the hard way. You're just going to be faced with things you've just never seen before 100%. In that position. And so that to me is at least one example of what I see is in a good leader in this industry is you don't do people's job for them. There's an aspect of you have to delegate in order to make, projects run smoothly. But are you actually willing to roll up your sleeves and go help them solve that problem? Learn something yourself and get right back out and realize people respect that. People actually, I think, like that aspect of it. But as the individual, we've all seen, like you said, and come up with a bunch of different examples of you're going to get by for a little bit. No one's going to want to work with you again if you just lean on that.
So two things you said that really have been big topics of conversation with us lately. One is empathy, right? I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I think that, again, I think as an industry, I think we're getting better. If you look at the trends, 20 years that I've been around, I definitely think we're getting better as far as that goes, but it's so important to be an empathetic leader. You don't necessarily always, I always say I feel like I'm a pretty empathetic person. Now, don't confuse that for sympathetic, right?
There's a difference.
There is a difference there where I can definitely understand the situation you're coming from. Doesn't mean I feel sorry for you or I, but to be able to really take a step back and put yourself in the shoes of that young engineer that's coming to you, right?
Yeah.
That's something I learned at my previous company. I had a division manager that was awesome. And he was that guy, and he never really had to say it, but if you came to him with a problem, he would put down what he was doing. And even if he didn't know, he would tell you he didn't know. And he would sit down and be part of the solution. He would help find the resources and figure out, what we had to do to work that problem. And he is one of those guys that I joke around all the time. He moved out of state, but I tell people all the time, if he ever came back to Tucson and called me, I'd probably drop of a hat, go work for him.
You know what? It was the whole thing where people don't necessarily remember what you say. They remember how you made them feel.
Yep.
Just that kind of probably speaks volumes to that person you're able to define why, but someone like that, you're like, hey, I'll always go work for him. I mean, that definitely goes a long way.
Yeah.
You hit on something to be interesting to get your perspective on is taking it even a higher level is the, why do companies even exist? Right. And so you talk about the empathy of people and supporting people. And I think a big proponent of what even a company is twofold. One is providing value to society in some way, right?
Sure.
So providing value to your owner, we're building roads, we're building bridges. From that standpoint, I think we're all in here a little bit biased, but I think we work in one of the coolest industries.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we build roads, bridges, things people drive over, right? All it is supporting society and the community.
Yeah,
right?
100%. I drive my wife crazy every time we drive around town. I'm like, oh, I was on that. Probably did that. I was there, and she's like, yeah, whatever, dude. I don't want to hear it.
So all through Dozer CPM, like on our spreadsheet, that kind of stuff, there's a Stone Avenue. That's like our theoretical project.
Yeah.
It was the first job I ever won.
Oh,
as
nice.
an estimate, right?
Nice.
It's like you kind of have
you got to work it in there.
There's a couple little nuggets in there. But the other aspect, what I feel like what a company is it's providing a foundation for people to build lives around.
Yeah.
And that does include the owners, right? That includes the people that do it, and there's economic advantages. But if you aren't focused on the well-being of your people, and that's not just monetarily, though that is part of it, right? Benefits and money.
Yeah.
But if you're not focused on having your company be this foundation that people get to then, go to put their kids to school or, their T-ball teams or that kind of stuff. And then what are you really even doing as a company?
Right.
100%. And I think that is one aspect of it that some companies do really well in our industry and maybe some not so much.
Yeah. So so most companies, I feel like their origin is out of ego.
Okay.
Typically, it's because somebody thinks they can do something better than where they're at. A lot of times, right? So I feel like if you really look around, a lot of companies and businesses start that way, and kind of like hey, I can do this better. I can do it different. But I also think it's because of that, not only for themselves, but for the people they care about too. And I think a lot of business owners do, especially in our industry, not only do they, they've acquired this set of skills, maybe with a bigger company or, several years throughout working in the industry, but then they think, well, I could go do this for myself. Right. And I could take the people I really care about with me and we could go do it together.
Yeah.
And then I can start helping provide, better opportunities and growth for the people that I truly care about and their families. And then, one of the things I really love about this industry is anybody can do it. I mean, really, there's not like I couldn't go be the vice president of operations at name X company, publicly traded company out there, whatever,
short, no?
Yeah. Well, Apple's not going to hire me to come run their operation.
Just gotta get in the door.
But, and it's probably with most industries, but I could go set up a rental account with RDO and go rent me a Mini X and a skid steer and go start doing work on my own tomorrow. And, and then the wildfire that catches with these, it's really cool to me when you see somebody go out on a limb and start their own business, and then the fire starts, and then, you know, a $30,000 job turns into a $100,000 job, turns into a $500,000 job.
Yep.
And the next thing you know, this guy that you knew renting a skid steer and a Mini X now has a fleet of dozers and scrapers and blades, and they're out there doing 20, 30, $40 million jobs. There's not a lot of industries that you can do that. Right. And the foundation behind it is hard work.
Yep.
You know, again, you could go start your own tech company, but I don't know anything about tech.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd have to go take a bunch of classes and, you know, figure out how to write code and all. Like, a guy can literally come out of high school, go run a piece of equipment for 2 years for a big company, and if he really wanted to, he could go start his own business.
Yep.
You know, and turn that thing into opportunity for himself and other people. And then I think as the companies grow, the companies that I find are successful in the long run are the ones that are people focused.
And I'm happy you brought it there, because that's what I was thinking. That, you know, as you were talking about, is it really is. There's an aspect of just rolling up your sleeves and grinding through it, and hard work at the beginning, right? And the aspect of whatever it takes, I'm going to run through a brick wall as an owner starting the company. If I've got to run the piece of equipment myself, but like you said, very quickly, or at a certain point, it really becomes, do people want to work for you? Do people want to work at your company? You know, I mean, throws the word culture out, but what's the culture of your company? And and very quickly it becomes about people. It becomes about how you treat people, the kind of talent you can have in the room and what they bring. And there's always, I like to say there's almost a middle way to everything, right?
Sure.
And you give people enough freedom to where they feel engaged in their jobs, but, you know, you're still a business and those guardrails. And so in my mind, to your point, the construction companies that can figure out the aspect of providing real value to their owner and their client and that they want to work for, and then also attract talent by the way they treat them, that company's unstoppable.
100%. And, you know, I think definitely something that's I've felt a shift in lately is obviously money and paychecks are important, right? I mean, guys come to work because they will need to make money to support their family. I mean, it's just life. I mean, we need money to live, right? And do the things we want to do. But one of the things that I know we've seen, especially here lately, is, but what value are we providing outside of the hourly paycheck to our employees? What sort of things are we doing that are going to make them better people, right? Outside of work. When they go home, we don't want them coming to work, grinding them into moon dust all day, sending them home, you know, beat, broken, and tired, and saying, well, you get a paycheck on Friday.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, you know, we're just trading your time for our money, right? But at the end of the day, what are we doing to help people become better people, right? And I think that's something that's so important in business today, to really develop the person.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think people really appreciate that too, right? Everyone they want to do well at their job, but they want to grow in their lives, right? Grow in their skill set and stuff. And we were talking a little bit about this before the podcast, but you all at Tucson Asphalt, my understanding, do a lot of that training and you know, additional for your individuals. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've really taken a concerted effort, especially this year. We've got a couple different groups we belong to. The last podcast I did was with a gentleman from a group called TAC Contractor School. And what they are is they are for lack of better terms, an executive coaching group. Okay. So what they do is they take executives and they have they kind of tier you into there's different things, but you know, they have like an 8-figure group. So companies that are doing 8 figures or more, they take the executives from that, and there's weekly calls, one-on-one coaching sessions, that kind of stuff. That's something I've been fortunate enough to be involved in. Cool. But it helps us tap into a nationwide network of people that are, and most of them are entrepreneurs. The majority of the group are owner operators. There's a few of us that are employees of companies.
What was the name of the company? Sorry.
It's called TAC Contractor School.
I'll have to look at that.
They're based out of Pittsburgh, but you know, it really helps create a network like we were talking about earlier when it comes to not knowing questions to answers, right? Well, I don't know about you, but I've tried to do a really good job through my career of collecting resources. I've always said I don't have to be the guy that knows the answer.
Nope.
I just want to be the guy that knows the guy that knows the answer,
Yeah.
right? And I've tried to fill my phone full of contacts where when these things do come up, I've got somebody that I can call and say, "Hey, man, I'm working through this problem.
Yeah.
Have you seen this, or can you help me through this?" I've got no problem calling somebody.
Yeah.
But what that does too is a group like that allows us a bigger resource.
Cool.
We've joined a group here locally in town called 3 Pillars Training with Troy Jacobson. And so what we do there is all of our foremen and up, we go to a once a month team building and leadership training with him. It's about a 4-hour training with him once a month. And it's cool because he helps facilitate, communication is such a big thing, especially as you grow, right?
Yep.
And we've all played that game,
especially
telephone.
in our industry and running projects,
100%.
Big part of it.
And we've all played that game, telephone, when we were kids, where it's, by the time it gets to the last guy, the message is completely different, right? And so as we've grown, we've started to realize that, as executive management, we may have a conversation and make a decision. By the time it gets to the guy on the ground, that message is completely different. And you're like, whoa, hold on. That wasn't my intent behind that. So with Troy has really helped us do is from an entire leadership team. So there's about 30 total between office management, field management, again, foreman and up. It's really helped us unify and solidify any messaging that's going out. So you're shortening the length of the telephone line, right? And so it's really brought us together as a group, but also you start to see foremen that were, newly promoted foremen that have never really been in management positions starting to, like, light bulbs starting to go off and understanding how to communicate and have difficult conversations, because that's a big one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how often have you heard over your time, you got a foreman and he's like, "Oh, Stanton, this guy, he's just not pulling his weight, or he's not showing up every Monday, or he's just not getting it." It's like, okay, well, have you talked to him about it?
I mean, that repeats itself for anyone, right?
Yep.
Too, as far as
over and over
level,
again.
right? No one really likes those, but be able to, to your point, train your team to be able to have those conversations. It's important, right?
Yep.
Exposing
and so when
them.
you can see a guy, you work through it in a safe environment, and then they come back to their crew. Now what it's done is it's force multiplied me, my superintendents, everybody, because we are not the ones now that have to go address every problem with every employee. We've now got foremen that we trust and empower to be able to say, "Hey, if you have a problem with someone on your crew, there's a very respectful and professional way to handle it." We don't, the days of like, "Oh, get the hell off my job, I got somebody else," like, those days are gone, right? We have to treat people as people and understand that if you're having an issue with an employee, there's probably 3 or 4 stories behind that are creating that problem, right? It's not just because the guy sucks. Most guys don't come to work and just want to suck.
And I think that's a big part of that you just hit on too. And it sounds like you guys are providing all this training, is that, again, people want to improve in their jobs and lives, right? And not just the business, but is there an intertwining between what helps improve the individual and improve the company, and finding that intersection, I think is great, and more companies need to do. And I do feel like more companies are in our industry are really trying to invest in this stuff. The challenge is the time part of it too, right? We're in an industry, and maybe everyone is that it takes time away from running the job, and that's an excuse, we hear all the time, but I'm sure you guys are seeing just huge benefits from taking that, time away of what it does, and just how important, that is. Yeah.
Troy, one of his big mottos is, bad news doesn't get better with time, right? So we're so good at ignoring things. And just hoping the problem's going to solve itself. 9 times out of 10, the problem's going to get bigger, and it's going to take even more of your time to solve, rather than just having the conversation early, getting out in front of it, and taking the time to fix it there. You're not having to deal with this big hairy monster down the road, Something I do want to get into, talking about kind of changing workforce and that kind of stuff, is technology.
Sure.
I know we were talking about some AI stuff before that,
Yep.
but technology and construction, it seems like either guys hate it and they
Yeah.
want to do things the way they've always done it, right?
Yep.
Or they've just gone the complete other way and everybody's, either running machine control stuff on everything and they've got AI running their offices and they've got, it's like one or the other. But
For sure.
when it comes to tech and construction, like, where do you see the industry heading? And then how does Dozer fit into that?
For sure. I think in most things, in my experience and opinion, there's a middle way, right?
Sure.
And so with any type of technology, whether it be, GPS run equipment or AI or whatever it is, the extreme would be, this isn't going to catch on. This is worthless. There's nothing that like an AI can do for us. It's a fad, right? That's one extreme, which I don't agree with. And the other one is, it's going to be able to dig a trench by itself. And we literally, you better start saying thank you to ChatGPT now, right? Because it's going to take over. Neither of those, in my opinion, right? No one really knows, but it is accurate. And so for us, in my opinion, it's another tool, right? As far as that goes, and technology is another tool. It's a better shovel. It's a better hammer. And so for us, it's how on the jobs, how do you implement it to make things more efficient and maybe assist people in maximizing their output without losing the fact of doesn't have the ability to make like an actual good call or decision, right? And have
critical thinking,
that experience, right? So just, and my point is it's just ones and zeros, right? I think a lot of people try to personify AI and that kind of stuff. It's just right now it's a better Google, it's a better, program. And so how do you just be able to use it safely in that manner and then be able to interpret what comes out of it in order to do that? So, so we have a AI component in our course, which we're really excited about. It lives in it. And what's we really like about, we've played with it and really enjoy about it is, our course has about 90 different lessons and it's very extensive as far as on what it teaches. And so by the time maybe you get down to say the weekly or monthly modules, there's what did we quite learn in the daily, or how does this compare to what you learn? And so for us, it works really well because you're able to ask, hey, is weekly the cost the same thing as daily cost? Or why do I have to do both? Something you maybe wouldn't teach, but something that someone would think about. And it's able to then kind of compare the two and bring them together and give good answers. And so
don't get me started
for
on
us,
the daily versus weekly cost.
We can
talk about that for days.
We can get there. Everyone's got an opinion on that. But to the extent of, that's how we use it. It's a tool. It's a learning tool for that aspect of it. We have a lot of things in our business back end that are automated, with some AI components. But anything that's front facing and people facing, I was listening to a podcast actually with this chief marketing officer of LinkedIn. And she was talking about that she does not think that individuals who write ad copy are ever going to disappear. Because people like talking to people.
Absolutely.
Right. And there's, I think, always going to be an aspect of whatever you're posting on social media or you're front facing of a business. People can tell when it's maybe written by a computer or that kind of technology. Right. And I think it's the companies that the talented individuals, whatever you do, that are able to get your voice out there and be a little bit more authentic, and even with all the ums and uhs and pauses and what we talk, right? And how you write, I think that's, always going to be valued in kind of my opinion. And so I have heard, and I do think technology and construction does lag some other industries, right? Finance seems to be on the front of all of it because it's people making money with numbers on screens, right? And so they're in front of it. But in my opinion, the technologies and, AI is the one kind of the on the forefront of everyone talking about is how do we use it productively as a tool and just think of it as a tool without over relying on that, right? The field side, and this is more from a project management side, right? Because the field side, I think there's probably no better time to get into the trades, right? And I obviously really love and support and people getting into the trades and that aspect of it. we're talking a little bit more today about the project management side because that's our experience in our product. But absolutely, I think that's a great thing to get into. And I don't.
Well, with the video game era, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's not a knock on anything. It's just where we're at in society, right? And young kids now coming up, they don't want to sit in a hot, sweaty machine and look out of a windshield and try to figure out what they're building. Like, if you could take a kid that's been playing video games and put machine control in front of him,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've probably seen it on jobs. We've got kids out there now that have been, running blade for 2 years, and they're outperforming the guy that's been doing it for 20 just because he's embraced the technology and understands it.
Yeah.
Now, your machine control goes down.
So
that guy's
I've
screwed,
heard that
right?
argument, and I'm interested to hear your perspective because I could just hear someone in the back of my mind going, "Is like, well, do they actually know how to run it?
Right.
If they know the machine control."
Right.
But like I said, I think anything in like that is, it's a tool to be used again, and
it doesn't beat
I don't
learning
think
the trade.
It doesn't beat learning the trade.
Right.
So ideally, you're learning both, right? Ideally, you've got someone who's turning off machine control, and they got to cut grade themselves, right? Go get stakes and like, hey, you gotta hit this. But then also, if you have the ability to build a model and have it cut off, why would you not?
Why not?
Right. So be able to kind of do both. And so I do think in our industry there will always need to be a guy or girl in the seat, building something. But then how do we leverage some of these technologies? And I think in the project management side, you'll always need individuals who the critical thinking to go build a schedule, build estimates, that kind of aspect. But are there things like, takeoffs or estimating that there will be programs that come out that can just read a PDF plans and give you quantities? Probably, right?
I think there's some out there.
There probably are.
Yeah.
I'm sure I didn't make that up, but I'm sure those are going to come up. And then it's the construction companies, I think, who just completely shun those things and say like those are useless, are just going to fall behind.
Yeah.
Because the teams that do, they're going to have to interpret the information that comes in.
Sure.
I think that person's always going to need to be there, but they're just going to be that much more productive and further.
Well, yeah,
ahead.
and they're going to be able to they're going to be able to produce more bids.
Yeah.
They're going to, it's just going to streamline their process, right?
It's like the internet, using the internet now or using email, like none of those things. Jobs are run with all that, without that, right? Spreadsheets, it was all on paper beforehand, right? And so my thought on kind of AI and this emerging technologies is just that. Take the middle ground, use it as a tool, make sure you're not putting company proprietary information in something that's going to steal it. But, I don't steal maybe a strong word, but use it to teach the model, whatever. You got to be careful of those kind of things. But other than that, I think people should embrace it, but just realize it's like any other tool.
Yeah. On the project management side, for somebody that's coming up in, maybe a young project engineer or, new project manager, are there any tools or systems that you swear by? You're like, man, I gotta, if you're gonna start your foundation, here's some of the things that you really need to either invest in or look at or get familiar with.
There was one that I was actually thinking about this yesterday. When you asked that question, and I was gonna talk a little bit about, and I'll bring it back to that question, is if like, what do I feel like if someone wanted to get into this industry and didn't have any maybe construction experience, but wanted to be a project engineer, what would the one program or programs be that I feel like you should learn? And so to that answer your question, I think Primavera P6 is pretty foundational.
Sure.
I know there's Microsoft projects.
I'm a project guy. I don't have a lot of experience with Primavera.
So
but
let's take a scheduling program. We can make it a little bit more general because either one and an individual Microsoft projects might be a little bit easier to obtain, but I think the industry runs P6, right? Yeah. Pretty standard across the whole entire industry.
Yeah.
There might be some other that come up I've heard of. I know people are moving away, but I think that's a standard one. And so when I would be teaching young project engineers, if like you want to learn how to schedule, learn how to schedule
so
on a program, because
they're intimidating, right? I mean, from a lot of the stuff as an engineer that people are going to put in front of you, a CPM schedule is probably one of the most intimidating things that you could put in front of a new project engineer.
It's at the core of everything you're going to do, though,
it
right?
Is, 100%.
And being able to manage and run a schedule. So I think when you look at the different financial programs, you look at the different, construction management programs, you look at the different time card systems, those now you start diverging, right? A little bit. Every company's going to do something slightly different, do that kind of stuff. But learning how to schedule, I think, is a really big foundational skill as a young engineer.
100%.
Not just learning from your project manager superintendent how to logically put a schedule together, but how to build it, in that program. And one of the things that you mentioned, I think sometimes if you're trying to get into this industry too, sometimes you just need to get a foot in the door, right? Aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this is when I've looked at a lot of different resumes. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking the other day is like, what to me jumped out, right? If someone didn't have any experience, so to speak, or was a young project engineer and didn't have much experience, what to me almost guaranteed they got an interview.
Right.
And for me, it was always, if they listed any program that we use, I almost would always give them a call.
Yeah.
Because if they list, specific, maybe they had the experience running that program, you're like, okay, well, at least I don't have to train that.
Right.
Which is a big aspect of it. And so if I was a young individual that maybe wanted to get into this industry and didn't have maybe that experience or wanted to grow my career as a young project engineer, back to your question, I would go maybe find the company I wanted to work for, maybe figure out what programs they use, or learning how to schedule, learning P6 or Microsoft Project as well, and be able to show up in that interview and put it on your resume like, hey, I've spent time on YouTube. I know how to build a schedule. I mean, I'm sure if you had someone come to you that was hungry and they showed that initiative, you'd almost always give them a chance.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned YouTube, because the world at YouTube University now is
so much good
nuts,
stuff.
Which what you can find on there. And there's almost no reason for anybody to not know anything, right?
For sure.
And be able to figure stuff out. I mean, that's one of the things, like, honestly, if I was I think we give the advice all the time to people. If there's something you want to learn that we do or the industry does, you could probably find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, that is again, I think it's overlooked as a tool and a resource. We've invested in the BuildWit platform. I don't know if you guys have used that. So we have that available to our entire field staff, and it's a really good platform. And same thing, you find those tools that can provide you the information and resources that maybe you don't have time to get all day, every day, right? But how many guys go home and scroll TikTok for 2 hours looking at monkeys jumping off a wall or something? Yeah. You can invest that time, an hour and a half a day, into YouTube University and probably figure out how to schedule pretty quickly,
Yeah, I really like what they're doing. There's I met Aaron a couple different times, right? I've been to their dirt world, right? And I really like the message that they have, trying to get people into the trades and that kind of set. And, we're trying to be something similar on the project management side. And we feel like we go kind of hand in hand with that but be able to, like you said, if individuals have that time, YouTube's great. The challenge is, what do you trust and where to go find it and where to bring it, right? And there's a lot of different things. And so, I think one is some of those programs, but two is, is there somewhere and something you can kind of have someone go do that's a little bit all in one place as well. But no, I very much kind of like what they're doing as well.
Yep. Yeah. It's, there's some good stuff out there for sure. If people, if guys just look around for it, look in the right places. Right.
Yeah. And we're all trying to do something similar. Just like I said, we like this industry. It's a really good thing to do. Let's get people in it. Yeah. Especially as a lot of people are retiring. So what can we do to make it better and make people's lives a little bit more, productive and enjoyable while they're here?
That's a big thing too that comes up all the time. It's kind of that succession and aging of the industry, right? We've got, really, if you look around at a lot of companies, within the next 5 years, we're going to lose a lot of talent. There's a lot of really talented guys that are just aging out into retirement. And there's this, we can go into it. There's I talk about it a lot, but, I worked through kind of the 08, 09 recession, right? When everything really took a tank here in Tucson, going across everywhere. That, in my perspective, created an age gap.
Okay.
Right? Because a lot of people left the industry, and there was a lot of years there where people were scared to get back into construction. Oh, I don't know. You're not going to have work. You need to do something else. So we have this gap of guys that are like mid to late 60s that are getting ready to retire. And then the next generation, like, there's not a lot in that, so then the next group is kind of our range, that 40 to 35 to 50 range. But then there's kind of this gap, and now there's a lot of young guys coming in, right?
Mhm.
So how do we, technology is going to be one of those ways, and through training platforms and
For
stuff like
sure.
this, to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Because when those guys go, they're
Mhm.
gone,
Yeah.
and so I always look at it like it's been kind of my age generation where I've had 20 years to try to extract as much as I can.
Yeah.
But now there is an age gap, and the industry has grown so big that you have to utilize these training tools and training platforms
Yeah, exactly.
to supplement that learning, right? Because the guys coming in now, we don't have 20 years to wait for them
Yep.
to be ready,
Yep.
right? We got these guys that have been in the industry a year, and we need them ready tomorrow.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Is how do you get those individuals up to speed, and then the knowledge base that's maybe leaving, how do you make sure you capture that before they leave in a manner that is replicable for your
Right.
company, right? Because they can't pull up a chair next to everyone and do that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so how do you, in order to do that? And so being able to have, training platforms like that, that's good information, right?
Yeah.
That's good quality, shows how to do that, I think is extremely important. I think things are cyclical too,
Sure.
and this is maybe my personal opinion is, there's going to be a lot of individuals leaving, but I think at a certain point, there's still investment in infrastructure,
For
right?
sure.
There's still going to be investment in need for construction companies. And so even if there is a dip, maybe temporarily, and even maybe we're seeing it now in some of those positions, I do think as the demand goes up, maybe the pay goes up, the benefit
For
goes
sure.
up, and that kind of thing goes up, where you're going to have individuals maybe coming back into it. And, hopefully, stuff like this and what Bill was doing is bringing maybe, people back into the industry of that aspect and kind of growing it. But I do think that, eventually, we'll get to that size. But it's the companies that are willing to do that are the ones that are going to succeed, right?
Yeah.
And so that I think is a big part, because you hear people and companies complaining that, we're not, people are leaving, and my, the younger generation doesn't know how to work, or they don't know how to get all that.
I don't buy it.
All of that. I don't either, because I think it boils down to, well, what are you doing to train the people? What
100%.
are you doing to bring them and grow them? What are you doing to get that knowledge from your team before they retire so you can grow as a company?
Yeah.
And so, companies probably aren't going to make it because they're going to blame someone else's problem, right? They're going to
it's
say,
the millennials,
oh,
right?
it's the generation,
But it's
or whatever
the
it is.
people that created the millennials that are complaining about the millennials.
It's either the millennials or it's the Gen Z, or it's the boomers that are retiring because they didn't know how to train. Whatever it is, it's blame.
Yeah.
But the real strong companies, again, going back to it, is they know how to support people.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to motivate people, and they know to train. They know how to train their teams and kind of keep them in the industry. And I do think there is probably a big conversation around, like, how do you even get that message to people to get in the industry, right? And that's where I think some other people, you're doing a real great job. But once you get them in, how do you, like you said, get them up to speed? And I think it's not just that mentoring and that day-to-day, but it's being able to take, shameless plug, take courses like ours, or take those things that get them up to speed, a
shorten that
faster.
learning curve.
Which is kind of big, and shorten that learning curve with good quality information,
For
right?
sure.
Not just send them to like a
Google.
YouTube video, Google, because you just don't know what's coming back.
100%.
But are you able to get them trained up in your way as fast as you can? I think it's really important, and those are the companies that are going to succeed, and they're the ones that aren't complaining. They're the ones that are just figuring it out.
Yep. So speaking of figuring things out, what is something that over the course of your career you feel like, we always have lessons learned along the ways, right? And like my dad used to always tell me, boy, you always like to learn things the hard way, don't you? Even though somebody else had done it. What's something kind of in your career that you look back on and you think, man, I really learned a hard lesson there, and I want people moving forward to know, like, they don't have to learn this lesson. I learned it for them, and now I want to share that with them.
So I think the one that just jumps to my mind, so it's probably the one that to talk about, is what is the workload you have on your individuals on a project management side, and then the role of a project manager, I think has been really burned into me as far as a lesson goes. A lot of times construction companies run pretty lean, right? Because it's just meant to, you're trying to tight margins, right? Tight deadlines.
Especially
let's
public
just get it
side,
done, right? Yeah, especially on the public work side. But long term, that burns people out.
100%.
Long term, that's how people leave the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that definitely have learned over my career, and one thing we teach is, can you have a team that has their plate about 75 to 80% full at any given time?
Yeah.
And then what that allows to do is you have, and that's filled up with your daily cost, your weekly cost, your owner meetings, right? Your quantities, your standard stuff you have to do on jobs.
Right.
And that frees up that other, say, 20% of their time and energy to go solve the big problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
To go look at maybe the change orders, the value engineering, do training and development, right? And what I feel like
some mentorship from superintendents and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Go learn that. And that I have found the companies that follow maybe a little bit more of that model, those are their 20, 30-year project managers, because it's a more sustainable life.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing that I think companies sometimes fall prey to is everything's a 911. Everything's a panic. Every estimate, we got to grind through the weekend to get it done. And then, you know what? There's another one on your desk Monday.
Right behind it.
And that works for a very short period of time.
Yep.
But long term, that's how you burn people out. That's how you get them to leave. And so I do understand it's easier said than done, but I think it's the companies that focus on their project teams running that way, of actually having a little bit more room to breathe, are the ones that, even short term on the project, one thing we teach is really big is having like a margin expectation plan. And so being able to analyze risks and opportunities and then go mitigate your risks and go execute on your opportunities, right?
Yep.
If you're just trying to survive on a job with just your day-to-day stuff, there won't be that mental bandwidth. There won't be that energy to go do that. And so, if someone may be listening, be like, oh, okay, that's all well and good, but like, how do I pay for that?
Show me, right?
Yeah, how do I pay for that, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the aspect of it. And then,
but you're going to pay for it through retention.
Oh, there's so many
through
different
long-term invest. I mean, it's like the intent, you can't quantify that for me now.
You can probably do both. I think you can quantify it, but then you also add the long-term stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's, to me, I'm glad you brought that up, because to me, it's so important that I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you've been different places, I've been different places, and there's the culture where, especially let's talk about the PE level, right? That project engineer, field engineer. Some places, those guys get ground into the dust and overloaded with paperwork and reporting and this and that, and they don't have time to go get on a paver. How important is it for, especially if you take a project engineer right out of college. Yeah. It's so important for them to be able to go sit on a paver, sit on a loader, go
muck concrete for them.
Exactly.
Right? Just go be a part of a crew.
Go be part of a crew for a day a week or a couple hours, and those are the ones that, when you see those employees that have had those opportunities because their companies are able to balance that, they are the ones that, when you look at those companies, they're still there in 10 years. They're still there in 15 years, and they're creating that same culture for the new folks that are coming up under them, right? And then you start building those teams and the continuity between teams and just strengthening all of that. You just in the end, you end up delivering much more successful projects, because you're not just dumping people in the hopper and spitting them out the backside.
And then, like you said, I mean, what's one of the hardest things to do is train someone up, right? So if you short term are grinding someone into the ground, they're going to leave. So what happens to that, at that 5-year mark, right? You see a lot of people leave that 5-year mark is because they get to this point, like, is this what I want to do? Right. Do I want to just for the rest of my life? Something's got to change. But if you've built up to where your culture of your company is to, like I said, everything's not a panic, everything's not a 911, and there's a consistent operational rhythm, then those individuals want to stick around, and then they train the generation that comes, after them, right? Yep. And so it just becomes this self-fulfilling, either way you go, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But, allowing that room in project engineer, project managers, day-to-day life to have to be a little bit more sustainable long term, I think is really important.
For sure.
And one thing that I think goes hand in hand with that too, that on some of the best run projects that I've seen, is actually having your project manager not have anything on their day-to-day plate. Yeah. And so that I think is something that
to be available,
I feel like has been relatively, controversial too. It just maybe depends who you ask, but when I say that, what I mean is the best run projects that I can think of is there was real strong leadership and delegation to their project engineer team who did those day-to-day things, also had some bandwidth for training and development.
Yeah.
And that freed up your project manager to go solve those big problems.
Yep.
They're looking out in front.
And maintain that 30,000
maintain
foot
that
view,
30
right?
foot view, right? So if you have your project manager also responsible for whatever it is, even just the CPM schedule or the billing or the forecast, things that you would think a project manager was, if you can get that to maybe a higher level project engineer, where that project manager is still responsible for the output, right? So they still mentor, it still reviews.
You're still reviewing and publishing,
absolutely.
But
that just allows a tremendous amount of forward thinking, of planning, making sure the schedule is good in that aspect. So those are like the two biggest things of hills that I might die on, that I feel like projects just run really well and companies run really well, is when your project manager is is the manager of the overall project, and you've adequately staffed your project so they can be that. And then also so you don't burn out those younger engineers as they're coming up.
Yeah, one thing I heard with a previous company I was with that I really loved was they used to call their project managers the CEO of the project.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it not only empowered them, the project managers understood that ultimately they're responsible for the outcome.
Absolutely.
Right? But it also empowers them to build and manage their teams the way they see most efficiently. And there's this expectation that your project managers are not your taskmasters, right? They are truly the pilot of the ship. They're steering the direction, right? But they've got 100, not 100, but they've got their staff of people to manage the tasks so that they can make sure that you're staying on course and they can help course correct when you come off.
And what it allows too, very much so, and I've experienced this in my career, borrowing a little bit from the echelon front guys, right, Jocko? And those, but their big thing is, at that level, you need to be able to dive in, solve a problem, and come back out.
Detachment.
Right? Detachment. Yep. Sounds like you're a little bit more. Great books, and kind of teaching that they have, but kind of taking it back to when we were talking about leadership, right? Is that frees up that project manager to then actually go time to sit and solve that problem, right? And because sometimes, let's give people the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes they aren't able to do that because they're just so overloaded. Like, hey, man, I'm sorry, you got to go figure that out.
Or more importantly, to be able to foresee potential problems.
Absolutely.
Because, it's the whole, you can't see the forest through the trees, right? And if everybody's in the forest, you got to have somebody that's looking above the trees to be able to identify future problems,
So I think one of the best run projects I on had a project manager who was that detached, very talented, but was able to go in. And actually at the superintendent level was very similar, which was interesting, which I don't have as much experience, but the superintendent would also support the foreman, but they also didn't have anything necessarily on their day-to-day plate as well. So the project manager and the superintendent almost every day would go get in a truck and they'd go drive it. And it rather large project, but we were always 6 weeks to a couple months ahead of any major scope of work because the engineers, and myself as a project engineer at the time, we were delivering on that. They were out solving the problems and they were out planning the big stuff. And then by the time we got to that scope of work, it was already figured out.
Clearing roadblocks.
We just executed on it. Right. And so that I think is one of the biggest things. And one of the things that, we try to teach is, we call it operational rhythm, is being able to have a well-staffed team with a project manager doesn't have their plate. And then you set up those consistent procedures, give them enough time for training and development. And now you get people all operating in that way on all your jobs, and that becomes your culture. That company, again, in my mind, is pretty unstoppable.
100%.
Short term on a project for profitabilities and quality, but especially for long-term growth and sustainability.
That's awesome. So I have two questions, then we'll get into a little rapid fire before we get you out of here. So just bigger picture right now, what's kind of your take on the current state of the industry in general?
I'm an optimistic person. I'm not very, I think things go in cycles, and for me, nothing but positive, because I just don't think when it comes to what we do, fundamentally, there will always need to be construction.
Sure.
Right? There fundamentally will always need to be roads and bridges and dams and whatever cool stuff people build, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if this is an industry someone wants to get into, we love it. We enjoy it. I think it's a great way to make a living. And, I don't think it's going anywhere, right? Even with the new technology stuff, maybe certain individuals on a management side, their job might look a little bit different but especially on a field side or just as an industry, I think it's nothing but, long-term growth. And I don't study, political stuff. So maybe that's not founded, but that's my kind of opinion that I don't think it's going anywhere. And I think it's a great industry to be a part of.
I couldn't agree more. And then if you could wave your magic wand and fix one thing within the industry, what would it be that you would fix?
That's really interesting. I think it's actually what we talked about. I think one thing is making it a more sustainable, less stressful life for individuals.
Yeah.
Right. I do think there's a lot of things that, not to go into, but I think there are a lot of coping mechanisms that people have, right, in our industry relative to a real high stress level.
For sure.
And so some of that, again, I don't think is, and again, I'm not trying to dissuade anyone. It's a great industry to be part of. That's not everywhere.
Sure.
There's some great companies, but you're talking, there's a safety aspect of construction. There's time frames, tight margins you're trying to hit.
Yep.
And then you couple that with people that are just work harder.
Yeah.
All you need to do is work the weekend. All you need to do is work the night. Just grind through it. Like you'll get over it. That doesn't help.
Right.
So if I had to wave a magic wand, it's how do we get companies to build more sustainable lives for their people long run and still have all that output. I don't think you're going to lose any of that.
Right.
But do you have to work every weekend?
Right.
Do you have to grind someone into the ground? Like, okay, this can wait till Monday kind of thing.
Yep.
So if I had to, it'd be that aspect, is putting a little bit more of a long-term mindset into people and companies.
Yeah, that's awesome. I couldn't agree more there either. So we got some rapid fire I'm going to throw at you here real quick. So what morning routine must have? What's your morning look like?
You know what? You're going to get me going for a couple hours because again, I'm a big, I really like some of the Hermosi stuff.
Yeah.
I think morning routine stuff is overrated.
Yeah.
I do. My big thing on that is, do you have the discipline to sit down and work when it's time to work?
Right.
So at that point, if someone wants to get up, and maybe that's not where you're going with this.
No,
this is where
hey,
my going.
Yeah, go with it.
If that takes getting up, doing a cold plunge, going running some miles to get yourself in that manner, okay, it's all well and good. But at the end of the day, can you develop the discipline to, no matter where you're at, you're sitting in a job office trailer, it's 5 a.m., like, you're uncomfortable, but do you have the discipline just to work?
Right.
So I get up, make some eggs, drink some coffee, and go to work.
Yeah.
But if that's where the question was going, I'm a big proponent of, especially young engineers, figuring out how to work no matter where they're at.
Yeah.
Right. You might be on a folding table in a job office that doesn't have AC, and okay, cool, it's a fun adventure in the middle of Alaska.
Right.
But you just got to be able to do the work when it's time to do the work. So there's my little rant, but
I like it.
Not a big fan of the morning routine.
The morning routine.
I mean, they're great, but you just got to be able to do the work.
Sure. What's I know we've talked about podcasts and stuff.
For sure.
You big listener. Do you have a favorite book or podcast that you either have to listen to, have to read, or even, let's take it this way, if you had to share one book with somebody, I don't know if you're a reader, we didn't get into that. But.
Well, it's interesting. So I bought you a little gift. Okay. And I don't think you've opened it yet, but in it's 2 books.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Awesome.
So one of the things we do is we like to give kind of a little gift to those who, subscribe to our course.
Yeah.
And there's my 2 favorite books. So one is The Alchemist by, I believe it's Paulo Coelho.
Okay. I haven't read that one.
And then the other is, which I'll talk about for a moment, is called The Comfort Crisis.
Okay.
I should know the name of the author. It's sitting a few feet from, I forget who wrote it. I want to say it's Michael Easter, but forgive me for someone who wrote it, but it's called The Comfort Crisis.
Okay.
I think that has been one of the biggest impactful books, at least recently. And it's all 30-second Cliff Note version. It's all that we live in a very comfortable society,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes the day-to-day anxieties and stresses have grown on people because we, aren't in a time for most people, we live in the United States. We're very blessed for that, right? We're not necessarily having to go hunt for our food all the time or go look for our water, like those kind of just basic necessities for the most part in this country. Are well taken care of. And so you lose a little bit of that we're always comfortable, which actually causes some stresses and some anxieties when things come up.
For sure.
So, Cliff Notes version of the book, it's all about actually purposely doing difficult and uncomfortable things. And, once a year picking something that's really big, and the one rule is you can't die. But other than that, something you might actually fail at.
Sure.
And being okay doing things that really put you outside your comfort zone, and just the growth and the strength and all that comes from it.
Yeah.
I really have tried to live by, to the extent where if I get uncomfortable for something, I'll just be like, oh, well, now I have to do it.
Right.
Because, before maybe you give yourself an excuse, but you read it and it's like, okay, that is the precursor to growth.
Right.
Is discomfort.
100%.
And so just really leaning into it.
Well, we all know you end up learning more from your failures, right? It's good to fail.
Sure.
Failure is not a bad thing.
No.
I mean, I think there's a negative connotation behind failure, but I mean, if I look back on my just life in general, I mean, the biggest, most important lessons I've learned in my life have all come on the backside of failing at something, right?
So true.
And it's so important for people to push themselves and stretch those limits, because you never know what you're capable of until you try, right?
Yep.
I look forward to reading those. That's awesome. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And then what's one piece of advice that you would give to somebody that is now stepping into a new leadership role within the industry?
Yeah. I'd probably lean back on kind of what I just said, is don't feel like you have to have all the answers. And again, people see right through that. Yeah. And that's the quickest way to lose the respect of people. You got there for a reason, right? You got to that position because you knew your field, and hopefully you have some level to solve problems, which, to what you alluded to, that doesn't mean you have to have the solution, but do you have people you can call? Right. Do you have, do you know to ask questions? Do you know to bring inputs and then be able to make a call?
Yep.
And so I think that would be the biggest, what I would tell people is, don't let your ego get in the way of this, and then have confidence in yourself too, right? You got here for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's because you know how to solve problems and you got stuff done. And then just finding that balance between the two to really build your teams that really respect what you have to say would be definitely something I would encourage people to lean into.
That's awesome. And then before we get out of here, give us all your shameless plugs. Where do we find Dozer CPM, yourself? How do people get in touch with you and what you guys are putting out there?
Yep. So it's dozercpm.com. So that's our course. So it's a heavy civil construction project management course, like we talked about.
Awesome.
That's really meant to help, alleviate all the things we talked about, companies training their teams so they stick around and they're long-term, and then individuals either getting into the industry or growing in their career, or they're coming from the field. It's that, bridges that gap. And it's, we're proud of it because it's real information that people can use on their jobs. It's not just theory. It's actual standard operating procedures. It's actual resources that they can do to implement and really help run their projects better, which help their companies run better and grow in that manner. And so something we're really passionate about, and we'd love the opportunity to come work with your company, other companies, as far as doing this. So dozercpm.com, you can put in your information, we'll get a hold of you, and let's go.
Awesome. And then make sure you're following Stanton on LinkedIn. Also, he loves to put out some challenging questions that I love to watch the responses to, but it sparks good dialogue and creates good conversation within the industry. And so, if you're somebody that's starting a business or operating a business and you're struggling to find SOPs and systems and processes, make sure you check out Dozer CPM. If you're somebody that's coming up in the industry looking for resources to make you better at what you do, look up Dozer CPM, check out the stuff they've got there, put your information in, make sure they get a hold of you. So
awesome. Well, thanks. No, I really appreciate you having me. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, Stanton was awesome. Thanks for coming by, and we'll look forward to doing this again sometime.
Sounds great. Already looking forward to it.
Awesome. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to TAC Talk, the official podcast of Tucson Asphalt. If you enjoyed this episode, please sure to follow, rate, and share. It helps us keep the conversation rolling. We'll see you next time, where we keep breaking ground and building up the people behind the pavement. Until then, stay solid, stay safe, and keep paving the way forward.